Hello. Uh, Come on. Don't judge peeps.
Oh, first time for everything.
Yep.
So I suppose this is just gonna be our first podcast slash recording, whatever the hell this is going to end up being.
Yeah.
And today we're gonna be talking about how you should choose the parts for your custom computer, basically, whether that's going to be a desktop or a laptop. Basically, kind of what choices you have and how to make those decisions on your own.
Okay. Yeah. So, we'll just start from the basics here and go through the CPUs.
Well, firstly, we should probably assume that not everybody knows what each part is.
Yeah. Okay.
So, so starting out, if you're going to be gaming, especially, probably the most important part of your computer is going to end up being your GPU, and then next to that, GPU is also known as your video card, by the way.
Yeah, it is.
So GPU, graphical processing unit.
Alright.
That's usually the most important for gaming because it has to do all of the rendering for the models and the textures and so on. And then most of the engine work itself is done by the CPU. So, needless to say.
Alright, and then so the next thing will be your CPU. It's basically like the brain.
Yeah, most everybody knows what the CPU is. Mostly because when you think CPU, you think computation.
Yeah.
I mean, it is the computing processing unit, so or central processing unit rather. So.
Yeah, and then you got the cooler for the CPU, so it shouldn't be too hard to figure out. Then you got your motherboard. That's
The motherboard is basically just a connector for everything. It's kind of like the frame of your car. You know, you can, as long as your frame can fit it, you can throw any kind of engine in there that you want within a reasonable size. You can throw any kind of, wheels or whatever. And that's basically what the motherboard is. It's basically the frame for your computer.
okay. So then we got your memory, and this is a little more important than a lot of other things, don't you think?
Well, it's not quite as important as GPU, but I would say that it's higher up on your list than CPU simply because of the cost. Memory has been, and recently especially, it's been quite expensive. So
Recently it did drop.
well,
so
yes, recently it's dropped a little bit, but we're still in the middle of the Bitcoin mining craze. People still haven't really lost that bug yet. So until we see a drop in popularity in that, memory's still going to be pretty expensive. But you can get memory pretty easily. But the one thing you need to know about that is that there are different types, different formats, because there's different speeds and so on with each different generation, and they each have a different form factor. So you can't just buy, the brand new Super Stick 5000 and expect it to fit inside of your Toaster 200. But if we're going to move on from memory, we should worry about storage.
yeah, storage is very important.
Yeah, storage. This is the kind of thing that, whether you're good with computers or you're not, everybody interacts with this in one way or another. This is something as simple as a flash drive or your hard drive. There's also other kinds of storage, but we're going to go into that more in depth later. But that's basically what your operating system is stored on, and where most of your all of your files basically are going to be stored.
Okay, so then we talked about graphics card. So the next thing should be a case, and the case is really optional. Really, it's just like the frame of the car. Really.
Well, I would say it's more like the bodywork because it has no actual relation to the parts themselves. It just kind of sticks everything together, so to speak. Um, so as far as the case goes, the only thing that it really matters for is that it keeps dust off of everything and that it's well ventilated. And as with the storage, we're going to go more in depth on that in a little bit. The power supply, that's pretty important. Because, if you have a 50-ton car and a little engine from Radio Shack made for Legos, it's not exactly going to work out. And this is kind of the same deal here, is that you really need that push so that you can run everything without any kind of issues. But at the same time, you might want to plan out exactly what you're going to get, if you don't want to be running up your power bill.
Yeah, so the next thing is optical drive. It's really just a CD drive. It's really more optional now because since a lot of games are going to just online.
Well, that's true, Brian. But one thing that you do have to think about now is that even though we're moving away from optical drives, as we're moving to a almost completely wireless world, basically, one thing you do need to worry about is that many systems, such as like motherboards, for example, often they'll come with software install DVDs, or perhaps if you need to install Windows or whatever operating system you choose, that almost always comes on a CD. But except for the operating system, most of the time you can download it from the internet, but it is something to keep in mind.
Yeah, so then from there, it's your operating system. No matter what you choose to be, Mac lovers, you still have an option between what you have. You have Mac OS, that's Apple side. Then you got Windows, that's been around kicking Apple side for a very long time. Then you got the new kid on the block, Linux.
Linux is hardly a new kid on the block, but it's lesser known because it's not very user friendly for the modern person. I mean, we're starting to have a lot more people have an interest in it, but out of the three, it is probably the least user friendly. Although there's all kinds of different versions to make it easier for people, such as Mint Linux, which I definitely recommend. It's basically Windows, but the only difference though is just like with Windows and Mac, not everything is compatible in between them. They use different file types and so on. And we'll go more in depth on operating systems in a bit. Software, that's just kind of extra stuff. So if you want to get anything like, let's say you're going to be doing editing instead of gaming, one thing you might need to worry about is getting everything from Adobe. Adobe After Effects, maybe Sony Vega Pro. If you're going to be doing lots of heavy video editing, whatever, that's what's in that category. You can go ahead and talk about the monitor.
Yeah, so we have a lot of monitors by a lot of different companies. It's just like anything else, but the more important thing is no matter if you're playing games, editing, you want a decent monitor. You don't want no crummy monitor that you got from the thrift store that hardly works. That'd be ruin your experience with the computer. Isn't that right?
It is, but one thing you need to think about, though, is that definitely think about what kind of monitor you're going to have when you're buying your GPU, because, if you're going to be buying a pretty low-end monitor, something that's just, 1080p or something, so, just kind of a standard resolution, not anything that's, specifically made for gaming, you probably don't need the latest and the greatest for all of the GPUs and so on, but as with everything else, we'll go into that deeper in a little bit.
Then you got your external storage. That's mostly optional unless you're doing a lot of editing, really.
Well, even then, if you're going to be doing external storage, there's not too much reason to use it in editing, because most of your editing is going to be done on one machine anyways.
Mm-hmm.
So, excluding it being moved from the camera or whatever you're using to the computer, if you're not recording straight to the computer, external storage is really just more if you want to be able to take your software with you and travel around a bit. So that might be better for someone who has like a laptop or something and they need some extra space. Not too much. We're not going to go too in depth on that. It's pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah.
Then there's other things. There's expansion cards and networking. That's stuff like your network cards, sound cards, wireless adapters. Usually you don't have to worry about these, honestly, because at this point in time, your motherboard in current day has got just about everything you need. Unless you really want the nostalgia of going out and blowing $200 on the brand new Sound Blaster card, there's not really much point to it. As far as peripherals go, this is going to be pretty important. If you want to have like a really good experience, because this is including everything like your speakers, your keyboards, mice, and headphones. Basically everything that you're going to be using to interact with your computer itself. With headphones, obviously, that's a pretty big one, especially in some of the more pro league type games. Especially because sound plays such a big role in some of those games. Keyboards, that's kind of optional. A lot of people much prefer mechanical keyboards over. I drew a blank there.
It's what's
membrane
keyboards, and then you got hybrids, and
well, yeah,
those
you do
are
have
okay.
hybrids, but hybrids are, most people agree that they're pretty gross. They're kind of like a sad middle ground. But so keyboard's not too terribly important, but the big ones you're going to want to focus on is mice and your headphones. Possibly a good mouse pad, because some mice, depending on the type, don't really work well with certain surfaces. And speakers you don't really have to worry about unless you're going to be doing, if you want to see how it sounds on different things. Once again, if you're doing editing, because as any good person knows, as far as editing comes, everything's going to sound completely different on different devices. But that's a talk for another day.
Yeah. So then you got accessories other like case fans, controller, thermal compound, and UPS systems. A lot of that's actually optional. It is good to have
well, I wouldn't say
fans.
It's optional, but they're pretty easy to get secondhand.
Yeah.
They're usually not something that you're going to be spending too terribly much on unless you're building it completely from the ground up. Or, if you're one of those RGB gods who decides they need everything RGB in their computer, it's okay. We know. We all love RGB.
Yeah. But I think a lot of the stuff, especially with the cases that come in, they do come in case fans, so we won't have to worry about a lot of that.
That's true. And with coolers, they usually come with thermal compounds, so that's also not usually an issue.
Yeah.
So let's go back up to the top and let's start busting these down one by one.
So we're going to do CPU. So should we go Intel or AMD?
Well, honestly, that depends on what kind of GPU we're going to be getting. We tend to be, me and my brother at least, we kind of prefer NVIDIA.
Yeah. Me personally, I mean, I do have a MSI compatible with AMD.
Yeah. So he has MSI and AMD, and I have Intel and NVIDIA. The general rule is that you do not want to mix the two between, NVIDIA and AMD, or Intel and MSI, so on.
Yeah. So so should we get a AMD or Intel?
The thing is that while AMD can be cheaper than NVIDIA, the good thing about NVIDIA for somebody who's new is that it's very easy to be able to memorize each kind of video card and memorize how good each one is because they're listed in chronological order.
Yeah.
That's not to say that AMD isn't, but it's pretty easy to recognize something when you hear something like the NVIDIA GTX 1080.
Yeah. So we'll just go with Intel to make it simple. It sounds pretty good.
That sounds pretty good to me.
All right. So what you want to do, the website we are using is PC Pick-A-Part. It's real simple. It's not
PC
really hard.
Part Picker, rather.
Yeah, it's not really hard to figure out. But so we'll go with Intel, narrow down the list a little. So now it is assumed that if you want to get the series, you have unlocked and then locked series. What that really means is if you can
overclock it.
Yeah, overclock it really. Exceed its parameters.
Normal power, basically. So if you're not planning on overclocking your CPU, there's really no reason to go for an unlocked unit. Other than that, there's not too terribly much that's different. As long as you're going for something like an i5 or above, as far as Intel goes, you're usually going to be pretty good, or at least pretty good off.
Yeah, but we do need to specify between the two. You do need to watch out for the Xenos right here. That's really mostly for servers. They take the same type, but it's usually only for servers.
Well, yeah, and you can kind of identify that because of the OEM tag at the end.
So we'll just go with non overclocked. You want to do?
Let's just do an i5 8400.
Yeah. So this is non overclocked. See, you can see here. This is what it will come in. So this is a 6-core processor. That's pretty good. That's what I have, and I think you have a little more.
Mine is exactly the same. The only difference is that mine is unlocked.
So yeah.
And it's 64-bit for those wondering.
Alright. So.
Oh yeah, there's something we should actually probably explain. So you have two main architectures. That's what they're called in modern computing. You have 32-bit and 64-bit. There's many others. There's ARM processing, which is stuff like DS's, Raspberry Pis, stuff of that nature. But the two modern types are 32-bit and 64-bit. If possible, definitely go for 64-bit, but most things can survive with 32-bit. But considering how low the price is on 64-bit CPUs, there's really no reason not to get 64-bit in modern days.
Yeah, so we'll just go and add this to our part. So now, since it's the only thing, this is the price. This is the lowest price. You could probably find it somewhere else, but these are brand new. So
Right.
So you do have to be worried about use old components. They could wear down a lot quicker.
Yeah, especially with a CPU. GPUs don't really die often, but CPUs have been known to die out more than almost any other part, apart from motherboards, which kind of have a habit of melting themselves, mostly because people don't put decent coolers on them.
Yeah. So the next is a CPU. There's many brands. We'll just. Do you want to go with Corsair just for simplicity's sake?
Yeah, we can go with Corsair.
So
Just one thing to think about though is that you do not want to chintz out on this.
yes,
If you cheap out on one of these, it's going to be a pain in the ass to install. It's going to be difficult. Everything's going to slide around all over the place. It's going to have bad mounting hardware, and it'll probably take up a good chunk of space.
I think you had the Cooler Master HyperX.
Yeah, don't get one of these.
Yeah,
This is what you don't want to get.
Yeah, these are really bad. It's not the world's greatest.
It'll do the job, and for the price, for $23, it does the job. But that's all it does. It does the job.
I got a what is it? A Cooler Master water cooler, a single loop.
How's that one working out for you?
It's actually working out pretty well. It's I used to have just a fins and a fan. It was really loud. It was terrible. But I was running at like 80s, 90s with the temperature. Now I'm running like at the 60s.
Right. Which I'm assuming you're talking in Fahrenheit, not Celsius.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, because if you're running in like 60s, 80s in Celsius, you're gonna have a couple problems.
Yeah.
So
we're gonna go with Corsair. We'll just stick with Corsair throughout the build.
yeah, might as well. One thing to think about though is if you're going to be going for Corsair's RGB type stuff, it's going to cost you a pretty penny. Corsair is not cheap, but they make good products.
Yeah, so we'll just go with the Corsair H100i Pro. That sounds pretty good. It is a double water cool. If you don't, you could get the single version on these other websites down here. So Newegg, PC Outlet Pick, and Newegg, and Amazon. And you can go to the obviously the Corsair, but that will cost a little more.
Yeah, one good thing to keep in mind though. If you plan on overclocking your CPU, for example, or you plan on, really running it hot by running some heavy programs through it, so anything that requires heavy computational power, like algorithm solving programs and so on, you're not going to want to cheap out on this at all. Like I said, especially if you're going to be overclocking, because it's going to heat up pretty quickly and you're going to start throttling.
Yeah, you don't want that though.
No, you do not want throttling with your CPU, because even though your GPU is used more primarily for gaming than your CPU is, more often than not your GPU is actually bottlenecked by your CPU. So once one starts throttling, it can often affect the other.
Yeah, it can. So We'll just go with the double water cool. That sounds pretty good.
Might as well.
These are good. I would suggest them. I have one. I mean, it's pretty good. I mean, this is really optional between air and water, but yeah, we'll just go with that. So
Here's a great thing too about this website is if you go up here, it'll actually tell you what pieces are compatible. It'll tell you it'll make sure that everything is compatible, and it'll tell you if there might be some issues. And so that's actually really nice because that's why we're allowed to do this out of order. Normally you would have to choose your motherboard, you'd have to choose your GPU and your CPU based on that, or the other way around, you'd have to pick them and then decide what board to get based on that. And this is actually a really nice way of doing it because if you're going to be doing it like this, then you can avoid that entire mess because you don't want to end up with a CPU that doesn't fit your motherboard.
yeah. Oh no.
That's like the nightmare because motherboards will take a good chunk out of your pocket.
Yeah, I've had that issue once.
Yeah, I quite remember that one.
Yeah, I mean it was one size. I mean it fit, but it wasn't correctly seated all the way. So I would watch out for that. So we'll go to the motherboards.
Yep.
So it's since we are gonna try to base this around Corsair, which company do you think will work well with Corsair?
Well, it really doesn't matter if we're completely honest, as far as which one we go with. Although usually, if I'm actually remembering correctly, and I might be wrong about this, but if I remember correctly, Strix is Asus's RGB series. I'll have to check just to be sure. Yeah, there we go, just like I thought. So, most of their stuff, I really, really like Asus.
Yeah, I do too.
I actually have an MSI board from them, and it actually works out pretty well. I can't say anything bad about this, but like we said, you got to be really careful. Make sure that everything is compatible before you check out. So this is probably what we're going to be going with. Actually, we might not need to. We'll probably back it off a little bit because we don't really need 3 slots here.
No, I don't think unless we're adding 10 gigabit Ethernet card.
Which we won't be because it already comes with one installed.
Yeah,
Most of them do. So
yeah.
we're actually gonna go back
you
a
need to be
page.
careful when you do get your motherboard and when you unpack and install everything correctly. You need to keep the shield to the CPU because if you don't, you'll bend the pins.
Oh yeah, that's horrifying. Because what you can have happen is actually what happened to me. Although these companies are great, they produce good products. Not everything's going to work. So what happened to me was that when my motherboard came in, it was actually ruined. It wouldn't post. So in other words, it wouldn't load into the BIOS. It wouldn't do anything. So I actually had to ship it back, and they require you to have every single part that came in the box, including the software CD.
Yeah.
So no matter what, when you buy your motherboard, never throw away a single thing. Put it all in the box. Put the box somewhere safe, and for God's sake, make sure that you have the I/O shield in there. Or sorry, the CPU cover.
Yeah.
I/O shield too, because they bitch about that.
Yeah, you don't want that to happen. So, we'll just go with you want to do MSI or Asus.
Well, ideally, we want to do. Let's see here. I think we can honestly go a little bit cheaper and go with like a micro ATX because that'll give us more room for cooling equipment.
Yeah. Let's check it out.
Let's see real quick just how this is.
So here, if you look, so this is your CPU right in the center. This is the cover. But then to the right of it, you got your 4 RAM slots. You need to make sure those are good. If you get one, then get one. If you get a pair, then get pair. But you want to make sure
mix
they're
and match. Basically, is what he's saying. And then right here, you can see we actually only have one slot right here, and that's where our GPU is going to be seated.
Yep.
Is going to be there. We also have some others over here. If I remember right, that's actually for a type of SSD, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yes, it's called MEV2. Those are like a lot faster than our standard SSD. They're like flash speed. It's like Thunderbolt, really.
Basically, yeah. But they're also the other thing though is, as with anything, the more advanced that you get, the bigger chunk it's going to take out of your wallet.
Yeah. So
So heading over here, we can see that we have about 6 connectors right here for hard drives or whatever else we would like to plug in, whether that's CD drives or floppy drives if that's your thing for some reason and you have a converter for it. So we have 6 SATA ports in total. We got the power right here. I believe this might actually be the CPU power over here. I'd have to take a closer look at it.
the one down here on the bottom, these are 6 gigabit speeds. Really, these are the other like 4s or 2s.
So really, for your 2 main drives, you're going to want to be able to use these.
Yeah, you want to make sure you read the instructions.
So we're going to go ahead and add this one to it. That was the Micro ATX right
Yes.
here.
Yeah.
So this one's actually not going to cost us too terribly much, but we're just going for kind of a baseline PC that'll get everything done for you. We're not going to go top of the line RGB because we really want to show you guys that you can come out with this pretty cheap. You just got to look out for what you're buying and make sure that everything is compatible, which as we can see it still is.
Yeah, that's a good thing. So we'll go to memory. Now, since we're going to go with Corsair, it will be a little pricey, but you want to make sure when you're doing these types, you want to make sure you get the right series of CPU, RAM for your CPU, because if you don't, it won't work correctly.
Well, yeah, that's true, but that's not really something we're going to have to worry about since our CPU is just Intel. We can use
Yep.
RAM or anything. We can use any kind of RAM that we want with it. The only thing that you have to worry about is you need to make sure that all of your RAM are the same ideally, because they work in pairs.
Yeah.
So honestly, most of these are pretty goddamn expensive.
This one right here, the Corsair, this one right here, the top one.
Yeah, I
So
know.
it is one. It is 1 gig. All right, 1 8 gig.
I would actually go for 2 4 gigabytes if possible, because that kind of spreads out the workload a little bit rather than one stick.
Yeah, because they will get really hot. Do you want to take a look at it?
Yeah, let's go ahead just to be sure.
Yeah. So this is what it'll look like. I think that these are the exact ones you got too.
Yeah, I actually have I have 1 8 gig stick. Sadly, for now, I'm still planning an upgrade, in my current tower at least. But so this is DDR4, should be compatible with our current computer, and this is what I was talking about. Is for each motherboard that you have, it only takes 1 type of RAM. So you need to check and make sure which one it is, because we have DDR, which is the first one, all the way up through I believe DDR5 currently as of February 2019.
Yeah, I think so.
So
So
we're gonna go
it
ahead and
is
throw
right
in
here,
the. It's this one right here. It's the 2 4 gigs.
oh, okay.
Because we're not gonna go with
Yeah.
RGB or anything for now.
Yeah. So
We don't need any more additional memory, so we're gonna head over to storage.
now this is really optional. Well, you can go hard. You can go hard drive or SSD. What the big difference between the two really is, the SSD really boots faster and there's no moving parts. In the hard disk there is, you got the ARM and then the disk that spins and writes.
The platter.
Yeah.
So what he's trying to say here is that since there's no moving parts on an SSD, loading times are a lot faster, including boot up. If you're in a game, you're going to be loading in a lot faster. Most games, that doesn't matter because they wait for you to load in. But if you're impatient like I am, it can actually be really nice, and your computer turns on really, really quickly.
Yeah. So this
So
is
what most people do is that they'll go with an SSD for their primary operating system, and they'll throw their favorite games onto there.
Yeah.
And then they'll have a secondary hard disk drive for the rest of their games, whatever programs they're going to get. Because the one downside to SSD is that it is drastically more expensive than a normal hard drive, and it's also much more expensive to get them in larger sizes, because they're still being developed right now. As we speak. I mean, they've been around for a while, but we just don't have everything quite where it needs for it to be cheap, quote unquote.
yeah. So We'll go with Kingston. Kingston makes good stuff for the SSDs. We don't want too hugely expensive stuff, so we'll go with 120 gigabytes of
I
your main
would
storage.
say at least go 240 or 480 just
Yeah.
to be safe. 240 is usually a pretty safe bet because, as you can see here, that's only going to cost us $33, 34 if you round it. So,
Yeah.
you know, that's less than a piece of furniture from your local thrift shop.
Yeah.
So honestly, this is probably going to be our best bet for now. We'll go ahead and let you take a look at it just so you can see what it's like.
Yeah. See, this is a good company. I'm pretty sure you got a Kingston yourself.
I do.
Me, I don't have SSD. I'm currently working on one right now, but I have 2 hard drives. It's not too bad, so we'll go with the 240 gig. So everything still is compatible.
Now this is the main concern here, especially with SSDs and so on, in these small form factors like this. Most modern day cases, they don't have docks built in for these. So worst case scenario, we might actually end up having to get some sort of adapter so that we can fit it into a normal size dock for a hard drive.
Yeah, true. So we'll go and add additional storage. As for a mass storage, if you're playing games or storing, so we can go with. Do you want to stick with Kingston or Seagate?
Let's just say we're gonna splurge a little bit. We're actually gonna go with a Barracuda.
Oh, yeah, kill 'em. This company is really good.
Seagate, that is. Barracuda is their series.
So we don't want to spend too much, so we're gonna get a 2 terabyte hard drive.
Which this is one of the chunky ones. It's not the kind of thing you'd carry around in your back pocket.
No, the SSD is a 2.5 millimeter.
Yeah, it's actually pretty small. The this one is at least.
Yeah, it fits into your hand, and then you got the hard drive that's 3.5 millimeter. It is a little bigger, but it does its job for mass storage.
And one thing you're thinking about is that's basically the diameter of it. That's not including the thickness of it. The thickness of these is much thicker. It's about equivalent to those old textbooks you had in high school. Some of the thinner ones.
Yeah. So now we'll go to video card. Now we need to be careful, but we're gonna stick with.
Since we chose Intel, we're going to end up going with NVIDIA.
Yeah.
For now. You can pick just about anything that you want, but we're actually going to go for probably either a 1070 or well, here's where it kind of depends. Assuming that we're only going to be gaming at 1080p, really you can go with a 1070 or a 1070 Ti. But if you really want to splurge on yourself, you can go with a 1080, which is we'll actually have to bring this pop-down menu. So we got a 1080 down here. And a 1080 Ti it's pretty useless unless you're going to be doing 4K gaming or 2K.
Yeah, and it does work with a lot of.
1440p.
Yeah, it does work with a lot of editing, but this piece really varies when you're editing. So
yeah, not to mention since we're assuming you're going to be gaming, so we're probably just going to end up going with a 1070 Ti because we don't want to cheap out, but we don't want to really waste our money. We still want to get that bang for our buck.
yeah. Now
I
there
do not
is.
suggest getting anything less than an 8 gigabyte. That's not usually an issue.
Yeah.
But I strongly suggest getting nothing less than an 8 gig.
Now, you do need to worry about the Armor series, like this MSI GTX 1070 Ti Armor. They overheat really bad.
Yeah, the problem with the Armor series with MSI is that it has a shroud around it that actually causes overheating unintentionally.
So, we can go with the NVIDIA right here.
Or, yeah, we could. That's Founders Edition, but Founders Edition is almost always going to cost you more.
Yeah.
But in this case, we don't have too much choice. Yeah, Jesus, look at that. This is why you got to watch what you're buying, guys, because this is $1,000 for a 1070 Ti. That's an awful price. That's almost double what most of these are.
So,
we could either go with the EVGA or the Founders Edition.
I'm gonna go.
Just for the hell of it, we're gonna go for Founders Edition.
Oh, we need to show you guys
show you
here.
what it
We'll
looks
show
like.
you. Yeah.
So this thing, it's fucking massive. This is, as far as like normal cards go, this is 2 or 3 fans in width. It's pretty big.
Yeah, it's chunky.
This is another one of the times where cooling is definitely going to be your best friend.
Oh, yeah, so we need to watch out. If we go to the next page, you got, so right down here on the very top, so you got 3 display ports. So, yeah. Oh, sorry, guys. So right here, up there, you got a display port. Then next to it is a HDMI, and then you got 2 display ports on near the bottom.
And then you have DVI right
Yeah,
here.
DVI is good, but I don't think. Yeah, I don't have a DVI on mine.
DVI, what's a good way to explain this? DVI is better than HDMI, as much as I hate to say it, because it has all the functionality of DisplayPort, but it's kind of the ugly duckling of the bunch. It's hardly ever used. But the great thing about it is that if you're stuck with it, or if you have a converter piece, you can actually convert DVI to any other form, which is very, very useful. The same can't be said for the rest of them.
Yeah. So yeah, we're gonna go with this nice shiny graphics card. Note that this does not have any RGB or.
Yeah, this does not have any kind of RGB on it or anything. So, like we said though, that's not what kind of build we're going for. We're trying to see how much we can get for our buck.
So we'll just skip the case and go to power supply. That should be good.
Yeah.
So we're gonna stick with the Corsair theme here.
Well, we can kind of eyeball it.
Yeah. So you do need to look out like the where it says like 80 plus bronze or 80 plus gold or platinum or what is that?
Titanium.
Yeah, titanium. It's really not necessary. I have a bronze in mine, and it's doing really well.
This is the one thing that really does matter. You need to make sure, ideally, that it's fully modular. If you can't get fully, at least get semi-modular, but under no circumstances go with an unmodular power supply.
Yeah.
Because that means that you would have to find a way to hook up everything.
Yeah.
Which is an absolute nightmare.
And you want to try to keep your PC nice and clean with all those cords not flopping around.
Yeah, the cables for power supplies are going to be taking up a good amount of your space. When we're talking about cable management, this one unit is 90% of the cable management.
Yeah.
You only have a couple other cords you have to worry about, but this mess of spaghetti, this is going to be what you're going to have to deal with. That thick cable and everything else that goes with it is going to have to fit within there.
I think this is the one I have actually. So
we might actually be able to go with this one. This one's semi, which will work for us.
Yeah, it's really good. It works really well. So you don't have to worry about.
Okay, it is still compatible because, like we said, you need to be very careful when you're picking your power supply because your power supply has to be able to supply everything within here.
So since this is a 550 watt, it should support the how much are we up to so far? Okay, yeah, we got plenty. We got plenty of room. So
one thing that we do need to worry about though is since we're actually once again doing this out of order, we need to check at the very end to make sure that this is still powerful enough after we have everything added.
Yeah. You do.
Unless you go complete overkill, and you know you're going complete overkill, and you know it's not going to be an issue. Kind of like I did. I went with a gold series that was like 800 watts or something. It complete total overkill, but I didn't have to ever worry about anything.
Yeah. So
we're probably going to skip the optical drive for now because you can download most of that software without it, and that's just kind of extra cash. Not to mention that. You go down to your local school or any kind of government institution where they're throwing away the computers or they've shipped them off or whatever. Pawn shops. You can get an optical drive for like a couple bucks, like $5 or something. Yeah, so there's really no point to waste your money buying one.
I mean, you could always buy a CD drive with a USB connector and hook it up, and then whenever you need it, you need it. I mean,
right. Actually, though, we're going to assume that you already have one, but you are going to need one, assuming that you're buying Windows.
Yeah.
Because it comes on a CD.
Yeah. Now, So this is what my brother Gabe was talking about earlier. 64-bit, 32-bit. This does actually truly matter. So
See,
you
this
have
is the thing though, is that on here, on this website at least, they're only going to show Windows, but you do have many options. There's many versions of Linux. There's different versions of Mac that you can choose from. But just for sake of simplicity, and also because we're building a gaming computer, not a computer to listen to John Lennon and all of his albums with the Beatles,
yeah.
we're going to go ahead and add this top one.
Yeah,
The reason
okay.
we're going with home and not pro is because we're not going to be doing any kind of rating, which is also known as a striped disk or a striped drive. And basically, all that does is you can set up several disks to act as one. The issue with that, though, is that as soon as one of them fails, all the others fail, depending on the RAID type.
Yeah.
And it's not advantageous to us. So we're just going to completely skip that. We're going to go straight for the 64-bit home edition of Windows 10.
Yeah, it looks like it's the cheapest out of the bunch, so.
Now, normally I would say you can go for Windows 7, but if you look here, you can actually see that these prices are gargantuan.
Oh, right here, the professional.
The professional is the only one that's cheaper, and it's only cheaper by $10.
And then you got the home prime right here, so.
Well, premium, yeah.
Yeah, premium. But this
still,
is a 32-bit.
The price difference really isn't worth it when you can find that elsewhere. But really, Windows 10 features is really worth having. A year ago I would have complained and said that it wasn't, but today I'm a believer. So we're gonna go ahead and slap that on there.
Yeah. So since we did add this, now we should jump up back to the case.
Right. So we're gonna jump up to the case right here.
Now, if you do have an optical drive, you do have to worry about if the case is compatible with the drive.
Right. That's what we were talking about earlier. Was that different form factors will be something you need to think about with your case, because like we said, especially with those small form factors for the laptop-sized hard drives or the SSDs, that might be an issue if you don't have some sort of adapter.
Yep. So since the theme we're going with is still Corsair, so we're gonna just stick with that theme.
Well, we don't necessarily need to. We just need to go with whatever we can get for cheap that's a decent case. Because, like we said, we don't want to be sinking $500 into a Corsair Obsidian Series case.
No, I mean, even though it looks nice and it's nice and all.
Well, of course, it does look nice. But unless you're really a show-off, there's not much point to it.
No.
The thing that matters is really just how much airflow it gets. So we can actually take a look at one of these. And ZXT's not bad.
Yeah, I have one.
Things have tempered glass on them, as we can see this one does. So you can still show off a bit. We can see it's got vents along the bottom,
and
the
back, if you look
top.
right there on the bottom where the vent is, it does have SSD holding
mounting hardware.
And now this one does. It looks like it does not. From the look of it, have a hard drive holder from it. Yeah, it doesn't look like. Oh, yeah, it does. Has a actual hard drive cage on the back right here. So if you look right here, here's the hard drive case. But then down here, this is where you'll have to put your power supply. Now, like we were saying earlier, it does come with built-in fans. This is your outtake.
Right, and then to kind of go back to where we were before, this is actually mounting hardware for the small types of hard drives or SSDs, excluding the stick type ones that we talked about earlier.
Yeah, the NVMe too. Since we're gonna do this, we're gonna put our power supply down here and then our hard drive next to it. But then we're gonna put our SSD on the back as well. It will make everything neat and tidy. Then not any cords in the way, or try to.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
So. We're going to go ahead and slap this on there. That should be good enough for us.
Yeah.
So add. And let's go ahead and check.
Yeah.
So, software, we're not going to need any. Monitor, we're assuming that you have one because we already talked about we're not going to be gaming in anything past 1080p. If you were to pick a monitor past that, there's really no point in going 2K or 4K. Really, your best bet is probably 1440p at 144 hertz or 60 hertz if you can get it. External storage, that's not going to be a concern for us. Neither
Yeah.
is expansion cards or networking. Peripherals, honestly, we prefer to do those separate, but we can go ahead and take a look at them real quick.
So we'll just go
We'll
with
go
the
ahead with headphones first.
Yeah.
And as we said earlier, this is something that matters. So we're going to go ahead and go with the Corsair series. Let's see here. What
Right
we're
here.
looking for. Yeah, but that's actually not the. That's
Oh,
these.
yeah. See. Oh,
We're actually going to be going for a Corsair Void. This is what we want right here. Is a Corsair Void Pro.
yeah.
Is my mic out?
No.
Okay, cool. So right here, we're going to go ahead and go with this one right here. So this is actually really nice. It's got almost like an anodized aluminum type metal along the back here. It's got some really it is plastic up here, but it really doesn't feel that way. It's actually really nice. And you would think that that kind of rough mesh pattern would feel harsh, but it's actually really comfy. This is an over-the-ear type, so it completely encapsulates your ear. We have a microphone button, mute button right here, and that microphone swivels. And it doesn't actually show it here, sadly, but right where that cord is, behind the microphone, there's actually a volume control button that also toggles your sound profiles, which you set up through Corsair's program, and it also lets you toggle surround sound and turn the volume up and down.
So you will need to watch out. But this one, I believe it is USB. And that shouldn't be an issue with us.
Yeah, this one's going to be USB. That's not a concern for most people, but if you want to take this on the go or something without a computer to listen on your phone, this isn't really going to work for you.
Yeah.
So we're going to go ahead and, let's see here, this one right here. Actually, the price might have just changed. We just had it, and it jumped up a bit.
Go back.
There we go.
Yeah,
this
there it
the one.
is.
So now we have our headphones,
Now we're gonna go to the
keyboard.
keyboard. Sure, we'll show you. Since we got the headphones Corsair, we should just get a keyboard Corsair.
Right. Let's see here.
It
This
all
is-
really depends.
The question though, is this going to be membrane or is this mechanical? Type wired, mechanical no. So this is membrane.
I do have a membrane. It works pretty well.
Well, of course, membrane works just as good as mechanical, but some people really like the feel of mechanical. And not to mention when a mechanical keyboard is clicking and it bottoms out, you absolutely know that you're going to be hitting that key.
Yeah.
Which isn't necessarily true with membrane keyboards. So we're gonna go ahead and select this for now. We could go cheaper. We could go with one of these. I really can't say that I recommend this one personally. But we're gonna just go back and grab that Corsair one real quick.
Yeah.
And this one is RGB, so we're still suiting our RGB needs along with our headset. And not to mention that while we're talking about this, both of these, they can't necessarily be synchronized, but both of them can be set up together in the same program. So you can set them to be the same colors, and they all have their own modes and so on.
Yeah.
So for the last peripheral, we're going to choose a mouse. We're going to go ahead and go with Corsair. Let's see here.
I think this one's a really good one. It does do well with a lot of the stuff. Like, it does, if I remember correctly, it does has a couple of side buttons.
Yeah, it actually has a fire button right here. But the question, though, really that you got to ask yourself is, really, how much are you going to be using this mouse, and what all do you want it to do? Because if you're going to be doing some light gaming, this might be good for you. But if you're going to be doing something really heavy, you might want something with more buttons, more things you can bind to it. So let's actually check this one out. See, this is also not the one I'm thinking about, but this is also, if you just want something really baseline, this will knock that out for you. It'll suit your RGB needs. It should have a good polling rate. Well, it actually doesn't tell the polling rate, but 6,000 DPI, you're not going to go much higher than that.
No.
This handed orientation is right-handed. Most of theirs are, so if you're left-handed, sorry, you're gonna have to figure out. You're gonna have to get the mouse on your own and kind of figure that out for yourself.
Yeah.
But we'll go ahead and let's see here. Gotta find the right one. Corsair actually does make a bunch of different mice, but what we're gonna be going for is one of the multi-button variants. We're gonna go ahead and add this filter. I believe it might be the glaive, and I would be wrong.
Yeah. I think it is the one up right here.
Which one?
This one, the dark core.
I think we already went through that
Yeah,
one.
okay, yeah, we did. Okay.
It might be the scimitar, perhaps.
Yeah,
this is the one.
Yeah,
Okay.
there we go.
So, one of these is actually quite nice. You would think that those buttons would be kind of interfering with everything, but it's actually pretty nice. Each one of them is pretty stiff to click. Enough that you're not going to bump it on accident, but not so hard that you're going to, really have to struggle to push them. It's
Yes,
pretty
that
nice
too.
because you can set each one of them's numbered, and then they have their own things you can bind to them within Corsair's program. Once again, as we said, suiting our RGB needs, we have a DPI adjustment here as well as a tactile scroll wheel. These have alternating types of tactileness. That's probably not a word, but these are smooth, rough, so that you can kind of feel the difference between them. It actually becomes kind of second nature to know exactly where each button is.
Yeah, this one's got, what do we got here? 14, 15, 16, 17, it looks like.
15 buttons in total, because we have 10, 11, 12. Oh, yeah, you're right, my bad.
12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17.
Yeah, so 17 in total.
So
Sorry, I miscounted. I counted that 10 down there. So, 17 buttons in total. If that doesn't solve your mouse problem, I don't know what the hell will.
yeah.
So, we're going to go ahead and go with this one.
Yep.
Add to part list. And let's see. We got our headphones. We got our mouse. We got our keyboard. We're not going to need anything down here.
Yeah.
Well, we might need some case fans, but we'll worry about that in a second.
Yeah.
We've got Windows 10 Home Edition 64-bit. 64-bit's really what matters.
Yeah, so
We
too.
got our power supply. We have a ATX mid-tower case. That's going to give us plenty of space, because if you remembered, we actually got a micro ATX motherboard. So that gives us a hell of a lot of space in order for us to be able to throw all this together and throw fans all over the place.
Yeah, so true. Now, with the case, you can take out the extra stuff that you don't need, like the two bottom brackets where
Right,
the
of
SSDs
course.
go.
In most cases, everything is removable, and that's not going to be an issue with this one. Everything should be removable. We'll be able to take everything out.
Yeah.
So, if we go down to the bottom here. So, not too bad. So, what you're going to be paying is $1,493. Call it $1,500 basically. And then with the mail-in rebates that you get from these, you'll get $70 back. So we're not going to count that total, because right off the bat, this isn't how much money you need. You need this much.
Yeah, the top number.
You
This
can
is the
get
base
this
total.
much money back, but that's not even guaranteed. This is what you need.
Yeah, if we scroll all the way down to the bottom where it says part list price history, so each of these, they've been color coded, and you could see where everything has been labeled and see. But it looks like we're reaching around into close to the thousands.
Yeah, it's not too terribly bad though, with each of these parts and so on, because as you can see, they tend to follow kind of a similar trend. They all kind of have that same shape. So if you're actually real good about it and you keep an eye on this and watch for when it drops, then you can actually get everything for a really, really nice price.
Yeah, this is current day. This is really during 2/11/19. So
Right. So one thing to take note here though, if we look at this, I believe it's the Core i5. I gotta check. Yeah. So looking at this Core i5 right here, that's this yellow line down here.
yeah, there it is.
It
right
has
there.
had hardly any variation. I mean, it's dropped down a little bit, but this entire time it hasn't been all up and down like that. And that's the great thing about CPUs. You can buy them just about any time you want to, because the prices aren't going to change that much. If you buy a Core right after they release a new one, it's going to be cheaper. But with the main prices that are going to change the most that you have to worry about is going to be, basically it's going to be your
Your
memory,
RAM.
So your RAM and your video card. Your video card is going to fluctuate wildly. This would be a good bit more expensive, but because they released the RTX series, this has dropped a little bit.
Yeah, and then you got the 2080s that dropped too.
Well, yeah, the 2080s. The 2080s is the RTX
Yeah,
series. Yeah. But needless to say, so let's go ahead and take a look at this. So we have an i5 with 2.8 gigahertz 6-core processor.
Not overclocking.
This is not an unlocked version. You cannot overclock this.
Yeah.
I mean, theoretically, you could delit it and then you could do more intense cooling, but I can't say I recommend that.
Yeah. Like you see these other YouTubers like Linus or everybody else, they will do it once or twice, but you don't see them do deliting a lot.
Yeah, it's not for the faint of heart or for the shallow of wallet. So
yeah, it hurts a lot.
So we've got the CPU cooler going for that. We went ahead with a liquid CPU cooler. You can go with either water cooled or with air. It doesn't really matter. Water cool is going to work a lot better. But you can do it with air just as fine, and you'll usually come out a good amount cheaper.
Yeah, like a whole $40 cheaper, I believe.
Just about, yeah.
Yeah.
So we have a tiny ass motherboard.
Yep.
With only one slot, so you cannot actually put two graphics cards in this or anything, and then put them in SLI. So this is going to be pretty strictly for gaming. This is not going to be your computer if you're planning on doing tons and tons of editing. If we go down here, we got a solid state drive. That's where our Windows 10 is going to go on, and then we're going to have
our mass storage.
It's supposed to be 2 terabytes, so we might actually need to change that. That was supposed to be 2 terabyte. We clicked the wrong one.
Yeah. Right there. Add additional storage.
I'll close that out and then add it. Because we meant to go with a 2 terabyte. Yeah, there we go. So needless to say, we got our 2 terabyte hard drive right there, and you can see how tiny of an increase that was. For 1,000 gigabytes, that only costed us about $10 to $20 more. Compared to, this is about a quarter of a terabyte, and this is costing us more than half of this price.
Yeah.
So solid states definitely cost a lot more. We have a 1070 Ti 8GB Founders Edition by NVIDIA. That's going to knock out pretty much most of the games you want to play. You're going to be running just about everything at least 100 FPS. Usually more.
Yeah, since the prices of graphics cards and RAMs are slowly dropping from the beginning of the year, it's probably, you'd wait a little longer to see if it'll drop. But you do need to make sure what graphics card you're getting, depending on what CPU you have.
Right. And that's not to say that these two things are always going to interfere with each other.
Yeah, no.
But it's just that they have been known to have issues when you mix and match CPUs and GPUs like that. And really the main reason is that the companies have no reasons to make them compatible because they're competitors.
Yeah,
so
like AMD is competitors with NVIDIA.
Exactly. Or rather, I actually forgot what it's called.
MSI?
MSI, possibly. Okay.
Yeah.
But needless to say, moving on, we've got our power supply and we've got our case. Our case is going to have plenty of room.
Oh, yeah, and like optional to move things around.
Right, and you can remove much of the stuff you won't need. Only thing to worry about this, though, is although it does have vent holes on it just about every side, it doesn't have any vents on that tempered glass side. So,
yeah.
Although that's probably not going to be an issue for us, it's just something to keep in mind if you end up building some sort of build that runs hot. You're not going to really want something that has lots of tempered glass because that doesn't allow for vent holes often unless they put them in there, which is kind of rare.
Yeah, it's really rare.
Got our beefy power supply. Well, not beefy, but it'll do the job.
Yeah, semi.
Windows, which we already talked about, and then we've got
our Corsair peripherals.
Yeah, all of our Corsair peripherals. So, what we're actually going to do now is Firstly, we're not actually going to be ordering all of this because we don't have that kind of money currently. But what you can see, though, is that, like we said, and that did jump up a little bit, but like we said, $1,500, and you've got a good gaming computer that you're not going to have to update for a while. There's no point in going to any of the RTX series, like the 2080s or 2050s, 2070s. The only thing that they're better at is ray tracing. And really, there's only one or two games that currently use ray tracing efficiently. So that'd be like Battlefield 5, for example.
Yeah.
So it's really not worth wasting your time on. So what we're actually going to go ahead and do, though, is we're going to see, we have a 1070 Ti. So if you'll go ahead and type in 1070 Ti benchmark for me. So a benchmark test is going to show us how well this has done playing certain games. It's a Ti. And so with this benchmark, that'll give us a little bit of information about how well our computer is going to run. So he's going to go ahead and jump over there, and let's see how it's done.
So it looks like it does pretty well, actually. And the 3D Mark Revolution, here's the top score. They're number 2, right underneath.
That's for the most common.
Yeah, that's right there, right underneath the 1080.
Well, you can already see it's already highlighted in red.
Yeah.
Same thing for here. This is the video card value, and that's talking about basically how high it scored divided by its price.
Yeah.
And also one thing that's kind of influenced that is this drastic jump up has kind of influenced this score, so that's something to think about. But let's see here. So if we do the benchmark, let's see here. It's not actually showing. That's not what I wanted. So what we're going to need is a benchmark. If I can stop hitting all the wrong buttons. Says the computer man as he tries to do everything one-handed.
Yeah.
Although we're computer guys, we should know how to do that by now, right?
Yeah.
So needless to say, let's actually look at a Rainbow Six Siege benchmark. Because it's not actually really giving us it's not really giving us a good idea of how things are going to do. It's just giving us a score, which isn't very helpful to us. So we're going to need a benchmark to see how well it's done. So let's see here. So in Rainbow Six Siege, this has been running at about 104 FPS. That's not bad at all.
No. That's actually pretty well. That's better than a lot of other things.
So at max settings, the FPS is about 103. And we're that's running at 1080p, I believe. Yeah, at 1080p it's running at 109. So if we go ahead and do these, let's see what it'll look like just for the hell of it. We'll do low, and we'll do 1040p.
Yeah.
Yeah, so 133 on that. And if we set it on, let's see if we can go ahead and set it to max. It's going to drop considerably. So even at 1440p at max settings, you're still getting 97 FPS.
That's not bad. That's
not bad at all, because the standard is still pretty much at 60 FPS. 144 if you're a snob. We're not snobs. So 97 FPS is nothing to sneeze at, especially considering you're not going all out on your graphics card.
Yeah, I think I bought my graphics card for about 300, and on Siege I'm running about 137 on average. That's high to mid on a lot of things.
Right.
So, I mean, that's not bad. So this number is not bad at all.
No, not bad at all. So that was the benchmark for this for Rainbow Six Siege. And if you haven't seen Siege, it is a very graphical heavy game. There are more graphical, like there are games that are heavier, but this is definitely one of the heavier ones.
We could look up the GTA benchmarks for the graphics card.
We could, but there's really no point because Rainbow Six Siege, it's a pretty good median. Because you've got games that are above it, you've got games that are below it, but it's pretty high up there for GPU usage.
Yeah.
So we're gonna go ahead and check out this i5 and see how it's benchmarked. let's see here. 8400. Okay, so let's see here. Gonna take over for just a minute here. Alright, so the average bench, 88.3%. So basically it's not too bad. It could be worse, but it could also be better. Right here, we can see that it's great at 94%, and then some people have said that it's poor. Right here, the average is 88.3. With gaming, desktop, and a workstation, all of them have shown that it's doing good. Because like we said, most things they're not going to be too terribly heavy on your CPU. So basically, that's probably going to be all for us. Because for $1,500, you've built a computer that it's got a good CPU, it's got a good GPU, and you've got plenty of storage to do whatever you wish. The only thing you have left to do is to grab a CD drive and boot Windows onto it. So, that'll be all for us. That's Gabriel and Brian signing off.